Hello, this is Vivi Leroux. There's a little wave. It's going to be hands-only video today. Last week on my channel, I shared both of these gorgeous Lucite Filigree pendants, and we did a quick tutorial with this style, with this little floral one. And so this week I wanted to do the same, but with this one, and do a quick tutorial with this one, though it's a little more involved, so it might take a little bit longer, but I'm excited to share this one with you. So this is a gorgeous style. I'm gonna actually put her on. I have this on a chain that's about 30 inches or so. When it's larger like this, I like to wear it a little bit longer. Okay, so these are both available as kits. I can link that below. If you didn't see last week's video, I can also link that below as well. So this is our little filigree star pendant, and it was available, or it still is, in 3 different color palettes. This is a Tiffany blue, but they all start with the German Lucite components that look like this. This solid filigree one is in black, also comes in clear, but here's the black one. And then these little open floral ones are more transparent or clear. They also, I mentioned before, they dye beautifully. So these are just clear, but I will do a video dyeing them, and maybe when summer's over, when it's not so hot. But it's really fun to dye them different colors. Okay, so we're gonna stack them up. And so we don't wanna line up, if you lined up both of those middle and top component look like that. So you wanna turn the top component so the petals kind of misalign perfectly, if that makes sense. So it looks like that. Isn't that pretty? Looks a little like Victorian to me, like a little old parasol or something. So pretty. So to keep those together though, we are going to use a little ball head pin, and I'm going to put small 3mm crystal on there, and then I'm going to string on a little 8mm cap, and I'm going through the small end of it, so it's going to look like that on the end. Also looks like a little parasol. So then I'm going to string the head pin through the center of all the filigree components. So she sits just like that in the front. And if you turn it over, of course, the head pin is sticking out the back. So I'm going to make sure that I'm using my non-dominant hand to hang on to all the beads and everything so it stays in place. And then I'm going to cut this head pin down. And I'm just going to eye it, but you only want maybe 1/2 inch of wire or so. Whoops, I need to find that later. Not much more. So there's a little piece of wire sticking up. Then we're going to take our round nose pliers, and I'm only going to go up just slightly, 1/4 inch or so up on the nose, but I am going to grab that at the very tip of that wire and make sure I'm hanging on to all this tight, everything's lined up. And then I'm going to start coiling this around in just little movements until this makes a little bitty coil, until it's as tight as it can go. And when that feels all snug and tight, then you don't want to really keep doing it, because you can, if you keep tightening it, you could break the head pin. So as long as it feels snug, you are good. So the only other thing you want to do is, if the end of the head pin is up, you can cut it, or I've just kind of bent it down back into the filigree so that we don't feel it. So you'll feel the wire, of course, but it's really smooth, right? As long as the end is not there. So it's not going to, hurt you or anything like that. I wear them all the time. Okay, but she looks like that. So pretty all together. So then we need to add our little stars all the way around the outside. So if you try to look at just the top component, there's 6 of these little flower petals, right? These large petals. The stars sit in the top of those little petals. So if you did purchase any of the kits, I give you kind of a good selection or palette of 4mm crystals to choose. And so you might decide the order of them. This is the Aqua Mist palette. And this one I just have two different, a transparent and an opal that I'll just alternate. I'll start with that opal one there, and I'm going to need another 8mm cap, and then I'm going to use 26 gauge wire. It's about a 3-inch piece, very thin wire, right? I'm going to string on my crystal. This is a bicone. That's probably the trickiest shape to use. If you had a round or a rondelle, it would work a little easier, but we're going to fold both the tails together, right? Once the crystal's to the middle of that wire, I'm just going to kind of bring both the tails together and form that shape around the crystal so it kind of goes under it, right? And it doesn't have to be perfectly even, the little tails, but we do want the wire to come together under the crystal. And so as a bicone shape, it's tricky. It kind of, you know, shapes like a little Y underneath it. But once that is together, then we're going to take our tails and string both of them down into the cap through the larger end so that the crystal sits inside of the cap, just like that. And if you're, you know, if it's still a little bit of a space, you can always push it down a little bit so that it sits snug inside of there. Now we're going to put the tails through the top of our little petal sections. And what's really important is that as you put them down there, you want to make sure that they're not going through the same opening. So there's a little piece of that filigree pattern between the wires so the wires can hang on to something. So it's just a little tricky to maneuver. And we'll get them down there. There they go. If you can see, I've got those both through there. I've got to turn it over and make sure that I've got a little piece of that pattern or filigree in between the wire. And then I'm making sure that this is sitting where it's supposed to. Then I'm going to use my thumb and my fingers to kind of hold that little cap in place. And then I'm going to fold these wires down and kind of cross them. Right? So they're just sitting just like that. Right? That's sitting where it's supposed to be, and they're just folded down. Then I'm going to put my fingers back on the cap and on where the wires are crossing. I'm going to hold that snug, and then I'm going to move each of these wires, little tails, separately, almost like a twist tie motion, while holding this really tight, but only a couple times, not more than twice. It just doesn't need it. Then I'm going to get in there and cut the little tails off. Come on, there we go. Then what's great about the filigree is you can push those wires, tuck them down into, you know, the components. You can also use a chain nose or a nylon jaw to kind of flatten that, but I don't feel that at all, right? And that's all sitting there beautifully, ta-da, just like that. Now, there's another way, another technique you can use if you don't want to use wire, and if you purchased one of the kits, I've kind of thrown in both ways to do it. You can use Supplemex cord, which is, or string, which is normally called like an illusion cord. It's transparent, so it's kind of tricky to see, especially on video. But I'm going to cut a little piece of that, and I'm going to take my next crystal and string that through. I'm going to do virtually the same thing. I brought the crystal to the middle of the piece of Supplemex, and I'm going to bring the tails together and string the tails through the cap. And the crystal's going to sit right inside of there. Then I'm going to put the tails down through the filigree. And same thing, I don't want them to go through the same opening. I want them to go through two. I want to have a little, you know, piece of that filigree in between it so they have something to attach to. There we go. Could take a couple tries sometimes, right? So there's our little star sitting inside there. And I'm going to turn it over. And then all we're going to do with these tails is tie them in 2 knots. In 1 knot and then another one. Supplements knots beautifully. So we're going to get this first knot really snug. And then we'll tie 1 more time. Really, really snug. Here we go. And there she's sitting, and then we can just cut those little tails off. And you could use like a little clear nail polish or something if you wanted on that knot, and kind of tuck it in the filigree. You don't ever want to use like a glue because it'll run over everything, but a little nail polish if that bothers you, or just kind of to seal it almost. But there it is. So there's 2 ways you can do it. I guess I like the wire because it feels tighter to me, like I can get it a little bit tighter, but they both actually feel really secure. So either way, you're gonna do all 6 of those. So it looks like this. Ta-da! Here's the pink opal palette. She's beautiful. And so once we have all 6 of those done, then we just need to put our little bail on the top. And if you watched the previous video, I already showed how to do this, but I'm gonna share it again. And if you didn't see that one, I'm going to show it here. So you'll just look at the openings between the stars, between the little crystals, and you find the best one for that makes the top of the pendant. I'm going to look for one that has a clear shot all the way through all 3. And I'm going to take a piece of 22 gauge wire, it's about 5-6 inches, and string it through all 3 of them, right? And kind of center, bring that to the middle. Then I'm going to fold up both sides of the wire and bring them over and cross them right on top of the pendant. Just like that, right? So they sit just like this, nice and snug. Then you're going to take chain nose pliers and fold up or bend up one side. And it doesn't really matter which one. If you have one side that's a little bit longer than the other, that could be a good choice to make the azure, straight one that goes up. So there's, I bit one up. Now they're perpendicular or at 90 degrees, however you want to look at that. And I'm going to do my first little wrap here. If you've done a tip drill wrap before, virtually the same thing. I'm going to use my chain nose pliers in my non-dominant hand. And I'm just hanging on to that right where those 2 wires kind of intersect. And then I'm going to wrap this wire around my straight wire, and only a couple times, right? I don't want a really long wrap on there. It only needs to be wrapped around once or twice to do what we need it to do. So once it's wrapped on there, I'm going to cut that tail. I'm going to use a crimping plier, or you could use a chain nose pliers to kind of tuck that little tail down. Right now I've got a straight wire up so I can finish my bail. So I'm going to string on a little 3mm crystal, and then another cap, facing up. I'm going to do a 10mm crystal. It's kind of my focal for that. And then another cap facing down, and then another little 3mm one. So the little crystals on the top and the bottom as accents, I think are pretty. It's a nice balance with the opal and the transparent, but it's also purposeful because the hole in the cap is a little larger, and I don't want my wrap to kind of fall down into there. And then I'm just going to do another wrap loop on the top. So I'm going to use my chain nose pliers to make my neck, and I want the loop to go the same direction as the one on the bottom so that we can string right through it, right? A pendant or cord, whatever you want to use. So I'm going to bend that over and then use my round nose pliers. And I'm going to make this loop a little bit larger than I typically would, say for an earring or something, because it's, pendant. So I'm just going to go up a little bit further on the round nose pliers than I normally would. And bring that around. And then I'm just going to use my chain nose again. Hang on to my loop. and then complete that wrap. And you can, you can use your fingers to do the wrap, but I like hanging onto the pliers. Whoops. I feel like I have a little more control over it. And then I'm going to cut that tail off and use my chain nose pliers again to tweak that down. And there it is. She is done. There's her loop. And there she's so pretty in all her glory. And then it just needs a, chain or a cord or whatever you want to put through it. If you ordered either of the kits, there's an option to add on a 30-inch chain. And you can, kind of choose. I like this little pretty bar one, and I put a little clasp on it on the back just so I can adjust the length. But you could also use any kind of cording, with it. But I think they're really lovely and lightweight and fun and pretty. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please subscribe to the channel. I always forget to ask that, but I'm here every week with some new tips, tricks, designs, all to enhance your jewelry making. So thank you so much again. And until next time, sparkle brightly like the star that you are. Mwah! Peace.